All right. Well, I'm going to share the a screensaver for a minute, uh, and that might be helpful for following things because we've got the picture of Mona Lisa, and then two helpful tools in investigating the mystery of what made this small unfinished painting by Leonardo da Vinci. Uh, the certainly the one piece of art without a price. The Louvre isn't selling this for anything. Okay, so I want to start. Uh, and by the way, if you are a new visitor and if you like the notes of this talk, such as they are, uh, you can just send me an email, looselyfollow@gmail.com, and just put notes on it, and I'll send them to you. Most everybody all the usual suspects who show up most of the time here, I just send it out to them because I have your emails. But if you're new, I don't have your email, and if you want them, uh, just loosely follow at gmail.com. Okay. Well, I'm going to start with a poem I wrote 20 years ago. Well, it was probably 25 years ago now, come to think of it, because this place didn't really exist yet as a retreat house. And I was doing retreats on the road. And this poem more or less happened on a retreat at a place called Peniel Ridge, which is in still operating as a retreat house. And they built a straw baled kind of chapel behind the main house, which was very interesting. And once they built it with straw bales, and then they put like adobe over it inside and outside. And once a month, they would have somebody come from a different tradition and give a talk on a Saturday. And happened to be there giving my retreat. It was just a meditation journaling retreat. Um, and on the Saturday, a Tibetan Buddhist came who was going to give a talk on the Heart Sutra. And so I jiggered uh, uh, the schedule around so we could go to hear this Tibetan talk about the Heart Sutra, which is really the heart of Buddhism in most traditions. The other traditions really vary. There's a lot of traditions of Buddhism, but they all claim the Heart Sutra. Supposedly there was 80,000 teachings by the Buddha. Those teachings were called sutras because he didn't write them down. He gave them just from the heart. Other people wrote them down on leaves. They didn't have paper yet. And then they sutured these leaves together with like thread. Those were the early books. And so that's why these were called sutras, because they were the sutured teachings that tied up little leaves of them. Quite interesting. I don't know what they did in Jesus's time. It probably was years later. It was oral tradition. And a lot of Buddhism was oral tradition until they wrote it down. But so I was keen on hearing the guy talk about the Heart Sutra, so we went. And this poem just happened. I just wrote it down as it happened. And the title of the poem is Lineage. People sometimes will ask you, well, what is your lineage? Whether it's in music or meditation, art, whatever. Who are the masters? Who did you follow? What was this line of succession? So this is called lineage. And this is sort of as it happened about 25 years ago. As I entered the Straw Bale Chapel at Peniel Ridge, a tall young man in Tibetan garb greeted me. He was going to lead a session in chanting the Heart Sutra. His head was shaved, and he had an altar set up with pictures of his teacher and his teacher's teacher on either side of a golden statue of the Buddha. As I entered, he saw the Tibetan mala on my wrist. I still have it on my wrist there, same one. As I entered, he saw the Tibetan mala on my wrist and he asked, "Are you a practitioner?" "Oh, yes," I replied. "What lineage?" he asked. "Da Vinci," I said. He looked puzzled. "Tibetan Buddhist?" he asked. "Italian artist," I replied. A faint smile rose to his lips as we bowed to each other. That's just the way it happened. Tibetan Buddhist? I said, Da Vinci. Is it Tibetan Buddhist? He asked. Italian artist, I replied. A faint smile rose to his lips as we bowed to each other. Yeah, it was a great session, by the way, in this straw baled chapel. It was like being inside of a drum. And so we're all chanting the Heart Sutra, and then he taught about it. But yeah, uh, that's my lineage. Italian artist, because I was teaching, I was using the Mona Lisa at the time uh, as an icon of meditation. I still think she is. Anybody who's been to Loose Leaf Hollow here, she's all over the place. I'm looking at the pillow over here. She's down by my front altar. There's a whole room with a beaded curtain with the face of Mona Lisa on it. Yeah, she's been, and that curtain was the original uh, housewarming gift by 8 women. The very first, I guess it was right around in December of 2002 that I had the first retreat here. 8 women came and they all chipped in and they bought a beaded curtain. There were a lot of Nashvillians there, and Pat Harris, I think, bought this beaded curtain of the Dalai Lama at the Opry Mills right near old Opryland. She said there was two of them. There was Mona Lisa and Elvis, and she chose Mona Lisa. I'm glad she did. Although I got room for Elvis here too. All right. Well, so we're gonna, you know, bump off of that. Now, why is Mona Lisa smiling? Well, I want you just to have just another look at these two great tools of investigation. I didn't come to my view on my own. Uh, I've experienced and had the good fortune to just have drop in my lap a couple of great tools along the way. Over 40 years ago, while I wasn't even living at home, while the marriage was falling apart, I discovered the Enneagram. It discovered me, I should say. I was just hanging out at bookstores because I wasn't living at home, and I was hanging out at this great bookstore by Rice University in Houston, and just drink coffee and just read stuff for free. I wouldn't buy the books because we were really broke at the time. Uh, and I just came in one night, like I was living at the school, so unbeknownst to everybody, but totally beknownst to everybody, as it turned out. And so after school, I'd go to the bookstore and get a cup of coffee, and then read a book until they closed, and I had to go back to school to sleep. And one time, I just browsing the shelves and saw a book, blue binder, red letter, the Discovering the Enneagram by Richard Rohr. I didn't know Rohr, and the Enneagram was a strange name. I didn't have any idea what it was. It means 9 points in Greek. Well, I know that now, but so why would I pull that book off the shelf? Well, it was a great grace. The book came to me, pulled it off, opened it up, and that was some 4 decades ago. And boy, am I glad. Uh, the other tool that we're going to use, and then I can get rid of the screensaver, is just whole brain living. Now, you might not know anything about either of those, or you might know quite a bit about it. We've been reading, many people have been reading Jill Bolte Taylor's Whole Brain Living. We don't know who started the Enneagram. It's at least 1,100 years old, we know for sure, because the Enneagram symbol with the 9 points and the lines is scratched on a Hindu temple in Rishikesh, and carbon dated it to about the same time that the Muslim invaders invaded India. And it probably came out of, my guess is it came out of the Sufis uh, uh, as a form of spiritual direction. Uh, Now, the Enneagram and whole brain living are, not true in the sense that both show how what gets in the way of our living, what gets in the way of becoming who we are. And so I want to just, yeah, that's enough for the screensaver. I can take that down, and then we can sort of explore both of these tools, and then see how they could, lead us to what Da Vinci happened to put in this. Now, what he had in mind, I have no idea, but he certainly caught something, because everybody comes to see this, and it's again the picture of no price, though it's unfinished. He didn't finish it, and that's actually an important point. All right, so we'll stop to share. Yeah, good. I can see it again. Now, the Enneagram. How does this fit in? Why is this a tool discovery? Well, it's taken me about 40 years, or at least a good 30, before I started to realize that I didn't quite get the Enneagram. Uh, when you first start the Enneagram, it shows you, as that picture showed you, these 9 points, or these 9 kind of, they call them personality types. There's a lot of different things there that they call them. But uh, it took me a good 2, 3, somewhere about 3 decades to realize that I wasn't a one. And, you're not a 2, 3, 4, you're not a number. It took me a while to really realizing what the Enneagram was. It was working on 2 levels. The first level was talking about a kind of habit energy, a kind of reflexive, defensive, survival energy that becomes habit for us. And that's, first of all, what it describes. So when I opened up the book that first night, and looked, right, was facing the 9 types, okay, and just it said, one, the need to be perfect; two, the need to help; three, the need to succeed; four, the need to be different. I went down the line. Well, I hated perfectionist at the time, and so I said, well, God, I think I'm a two, need to help. And that is a big part of my energy, almost as much as the one. But you think I could start with the two? Hell no. I had to do it right. I had to do it perfectly. I had to start with a one. So I opened it up and flipped to one, and I read the first paragraph, and I shut the book, slammed it shut, and said, shit. Because it was almost like I was reading a page out of my journal. He hit me right off with the essence of it. And again, uh, I didn't really realize that despite, I could read Rory's book now, and he points these things out, but you can't see it at first. You're saying, like, revealed, the big reveal. I've been pretending all my life, and that's what when you find your number, when you find your pattern of your habit energy, of pretty much the defensive shield you had to develop to survive childhood. Because you got to remember, and this is where whole brain living research by Jill Bolte Taylor is helpful. We don't have a upper cortex, either in the left or the right brain. They weren't functioning. They didn't start to function for probably till around 11 months, and certainly they're not totally functional until you're probably in your 20s, which is why adolescents, we all made such great, decisions in our adolescence life, because mostly we have this lower left brain uh, consciousness, and it's there to help us survive. And in other words, as a little baby, to get nutrients, to be held, food, water, get our diapers changed, and all that stuff. And you might have had the good fortune of being born into a semi-dysfunctional family, but some of us were born in extremely dysfunctional, even traumatic families, not knowing who our mother was ever. There's people in this group who had that experience, and so it differs in terms of how strong and how necessary, this defend this mind that just was, I wanted to survive, and none of us would be watching this if we didn't have that. You see, and that's what it describes, and it that energy sort of solidifies, and not sure why when we actually go to school and we develop enough uh, upper cognitive, at least in the left brain, to where we can use words and understand words and start to think logically. And you got a science class in junior high. You can start to think about the scientific method. Why we didn't drop that totally? Well, one reason is in a pinch, you know, in a situation, uh, you know, you need that intuition just to say run or fight or don't go down that street. So it's still there for survival things. Here we want to keep surviving, on this road. Uh, but it gets less and less important. And uh, and then the higher functions of thinking and awareness in the left brain and the right brain uh, can take over. But to be honest, it sort of drowns out that wisdom in the right brain. And uh, and you aren't your habits. You aren't this energy, but we identify with it, and then from that we have a self that we show the world, and that's why Jung talked about the persona and the shadow. Those two things. A persona is all right. This is who I am, and I'm. You got to keep. You got to keep. Uh, going, like, to keep that image up. That's why I haven't met anybody who doesn't know what the imposter syndrome is, where you feel like I'm just playing a role here. If they really knew me, they wouldn't love me. And so that's very common for people. Oh, I couldn't let you see really who I am, and that's what we tuck this stuff in the shadow. That's part of what shadow material is. It's stuff that, oh no, I wouldn't want anybody to see this. They'd never love me if they saw who I really was. And then a lot of it is pre-verbal trauma, pain, whatever. It all goes into the shadow. So that left brain that Joe Bolte Taylor's talking about, it holds your persona. You're sort of the person that you really want the world to see, and it's a bit of a mask. The word persona is a Greek word from the mask that the actors used to wear on the theater, and it had like a kind of big mouth, so that it would also be like a megaphone because they didn't have amplifiers. And so we're always sending out an image that we want people to buy. Okay, that's just that's just what humans are. That's what we do. And then we also have this little part of ourselves that I call it the hurt locker. The shadow is the hurt locker. And when somebody does something, says something, there's a situation that triggers some ancient hurt, we react. We react. And and then we get all, and then you lose what, for me anyway. I could tell some great stories about the time where somebody triggered something in my shadow, and I got all reactive, and I totally lost the ability to think straight. It overrides even the upper left brain, which has logic and words. Sometimes when you really get triggered, there are no words. You can't even speak intelligibly. Everybody knows this, I think. Okay. So first of all, it's the cover. It's a defensive shield. We don't realize we're going through life like this, but we really are going through life like this, which is how you survive, but it's not how you thrive. And so there is a second layer of the Enneagram that says this is just what gets in the way of finding what depending on what Enneagram teacher your essence, your true self. There's something deeper, they're all saying. And so this is what gets in the way, this old habit energy from childhood. I call it the childhood operating system. And you can be sort of adult until somebody pings something in the hurt locker, and then you're ranting a little 2-year-old or 1-year-old. Okay. And so the Enneagram could really help but it'll help because it'll show you what gets in the way. It'll show you your childhood operating system. And all of them are built on the trust, a kind of deep, radical trust that there's something deeper than that. Yeah. And a lot of people don't think there is. And most people don't even know to even look for something deeper than that. This is just who I am. Why don't you let me be who I am? Well, when who you are is an asshole, I mean, no, I don't want to accept that. But at your core, all the traditions, these are very old traditions. The Enneagram has been used in a lot of different cultures besides the Sufi and the Islamic culture. It's used in our culture now. But all the interpreters of the Enneagram, and it's only been out for about 75 years in the world in print. The interpreters, if they're any good, they say, "Oh no, there's something deeper." They have an unshakable trust that if you could get through this, you know, if you could get through that, that you could actually, if you could pierce through what's in between. And we have glimpses of this. Martin said, every once in a while, you cross over to God in meditation. Every once in a while, you get a glimpse. Sargo Rinpoche says it's glimpse by glimpse. Well, the people have glimpsed this enough to be known as the great mystics of the world. They all share, whatever tradition the mystic comes from, they share an unshakable trust in something deeper that we all share, something deeper that's beautiful, that's true, and that's good. There are no bad people from a mystic point of view. There are people who are not in touch with the beauty, truth, and goodness of their true self, of course. And when you're not in touch with that, you can do evil things. But it's a question of um, it's in everybody. That's what the Buddha nature is. That's what Christ is. That's what the Tao is. That's what Allah is. That's what these names of this. That's what love is. At the very center of everybody, there is love, according to Rumi, and I like that view. But there's a lot of people who don't act lovingly. They don't. They don't act lovingly. They can kill you or rob you or torture you. But they still all have that. Now that's an unshakable kind of trust that all these mystic traditions have, and from all over the earth, primitive, Western, Eastern, North, South. Yeah, that at the core, if you could get to it, yeah. Now the whole brain living, the big thing that I got from it is to realize that that I had Jill Bolte Taylor says you got to learn and you have to meet and have a relationship with the we inside of me. We put people on trial or whatever, or people are defending themselves, or I can't believe you did that to me. But this me, she said, there's a we inside of me, and I think anybody who's ever meditated even once understands that, because think of all the voices you hear when you stop talking and you just try to get quiet. All those voices, when you have these tough decisions to make, and then there's this, Mary Oliver, who's the great poet. She starts out her classic poem, "The Journey," with this line, and this will explain to you the we inside of me. She said, "One day you knew what you had to do, and the voices all around you kept shouting their bad advice." That pinpoints it. When you come down to it, especially but even just during the day, just for simple things, you'll have mixed emotions. Well, you have two emotional cells, by the way. Those are two of the four characters: left brain emotional, right brain emotional, and they're very different. So when you have mixed emotions, that's very human, because you got these two voices coming, and they're very different. They have very different views of the world. Left brain emotional, character two; a right brain emotional, character three. One is about safety. Character two is, Smokey is always trying to keep me safe. Well, character three is different. Character three is curious, and he wants to explore. And Smokey doesn't like that. But the one is contraction. Character two contracts because when you're fighting, you're trying to hide behind this thing. So you do. All fighters sort of contract. Muhammad Ali was different. My father couldn't understand Muhammad Ali because he had his hands down and he was so good. He could dodge the blows. He was rare. But most, we contract when things get scary. And character three, the right brain emotional, expands. When you see Mary, the Mother of God, the Virgin Mary, when you see icons of her, you don't ever see this. And you don't ever see this, you see this. And character three is what Jung would call the soul. And the soul is an expansive energy. The character two is a contracted energy. I'm sure that if the four-legged beings on the planet could think, they would think we were crazy to stand up straight on our hind legs, to stand up and show you our vitals, the heart, your inner organs for attack, so that impulse to safety contracts a life. And if you stay in that character two most of the time, and if you listen to its advice, whether it's good or bad, but if that's your thing, you're going to live a kind of contracted life. Rodin's The Thinker is a great sculpture of the contracted life. The left brain is not enough to live a whole life, you see. Take it from me, I was 32 before I even had an inkling of joy. I got a strong left brain, and everybody taught to it in those days. And that was very much my persona. And so I'm thinking about everything. Okay. And joy can't get through. Joy cannot get through this. You see, neither can peace, neither can love. You're trying to survive, but and it's trying to keep you safe. But you can end up safe from love. See, so that's and I paid that price for almost half of my life. I was 32 before I ever experienced joy. I'm 75 now, so I'm trying to make up for it. Now the right brain is expansive, so this is just human. Think about a breath. We breathe in, we breathe out. The heart, the heart expands and it contracts, doesn't it? There's nothing wrong about the design. I used to think maybe God could have had a better idea here. Why. But no, it's the universe is doing it. They say the guys who do astrophysics are saying it's like this. It's expanding like this, and it's just what we've got. But again, Mary Oliver's line. And if you don't know the journey, we should do a whole thing on the journey someday. There's one poem will change your life, but in the beginning she says, "One day you knew what you had to do." All right, so something wells up, a wisdom, you see, and wisdom is in character four, the upper right brain. That's why I say the upper part of our brain on the left side is thinking, but on the right side is not thinking so much as awareness. And awareness is wisdom. It knows what's what just instantly. And sometimes one day you just know, the poem is sort of framed like a person, maybe an abused woman is leaving the house. Okay. And, Mary Oliver would know that image because her father was abusing her as a little child. So the only thing she could do was she would get her little notebook and her pencil and she would cut out of the house and go into nature before her father woke up. The house was not a safe place for Mary, you see. And so one day you knew what you had to do and began, though the voices all around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to shake. And you could hear the voices tugging at your hem. Save my life, mend my life, each voice cried. All these voices, but you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do, and then it's leaving these voices behind. It takes about 2/3 of the poem to actually leave all those voices behind that are not helpful. when one day you knew what you had to do and began. We've all reached that point, and then voices talk us back. Go back and go back uh, into abusive marriage. Go back into living kind of a half a life. Yeah, yeah. So the whole brain living, you get to know your four basically choruses of voices. Character one, character two, character three, character four, and it's kind of a brilliant schematic for me. I took the teaching on the road to for 16 days in Italy like it was a lab because I always love to experiment. I mean, I got a lot. I really enjoy science, and I said, well, I'm going to experiment with this, and it was very interesting. I sent out the results of the experiment in the journal to people. If you didn't get one and you want one, just I'll send it to you. So in both cases, they're trying. In one case, they're talking about habit energy, the enneagram habit energy, congealed habit energy, survival energy. But in the other, it's actually getting to know your consciousness and those choruses of voices that a lot of times conflict. And to really befriend them all, though, because it's what you got. None of it's going anywhere until this brain stops. And then that's another mystery. What goes on then? See, what goes on then? And that's as you get older, uh, you, you definitely should be starting to think about that. Uh, uh, I took T.S. Eliot with me, and it was his last great poem, about a 50-page, four-part poem, the four quartets. And the idea of a quartet, by the way, these guys who get together and they're listening to the other one and they're playing off the other one. If you see these classical quartets, and so it's not like to be a soloist there, and it's so you really get to know your own mind. You get to know your own consciousness, and then when you're really at these crossroads, you can. She has a wonderful thing called a brain huddle, and you can sit there and all right, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And then you listen to all of them, and then rather than the left brain it drowned it out my right brain for the first 30 or 40 years of my life. It just has the power to drown it out because it's based on survival. Nothing stronger than the will to survive in this animal. But then, great, the right brain whispers. Anybody who does reads the Old Testament knows about it won't come in a thunderclap, it won't come in an earthquake, it comes in a whisper. And the problem with hearing whispers is when yakety yak is going on here all the time, it's hard to hear the whispers, which is why in a few minutes I'm going to stop talking and we'll all sit in silence. And really, so when we're going into meditation, we're really trying to practice bringing the right brain online, and especially the upper right brain, who I call Gracie, because that is where we connect to. Another thing about the two brains is left brain is where we get decided that we're the separate entity and everybody else out there is furniture, and that we just got to keep moving the furniture to suit us. And the right brain, no, it shows it's the right brain intuits that we're connected to everything. So only a right brain, really only a character four, your wisdom brain, can understand what Jesus is talking about when he says, love God with your whole heart and mind and body, and love your neighbor as yourself. Only the upper right brain can understand the wisdom there. It's not well, that's not two commandments or something. That's one commandment because God, your neighbor, and yourself are all connected. There's not like it's not your neighbor like yourself. You love your neighbor as yourself because your neighbor is yourself. You're all connected. Only the right brain. I mean, that's a problem of the Christian church. We've tried to understand a right brain wisdom teaching with our left brain only. Does it work? Then you start picking and choosing. And I guess there's a whole lot of people who aren't going to be saved and aren't loved and evil and all that kind of stuff. Trying to understand a whole brain teaching and decidedly right brain wisdom teaching with the left brain doesn't work. Doesn't turn out loving people. That's why so many people leave church because it doesn't feel like a place like love, and it should be. The original church, the Jesus church probably was, with all the other stuff. They knew to love. We'll talk about that next week. So when you actually use these tools, you come to the sense of the answer. Why is Mona Lisa smiling? Well, for one thing, she's no longer hustling for worthiness. This is a great phrase that Brene Brown introduced me to. It's part of her teaching on shame. Shame lives in your character two, lower right, right feeling brain. Shame lives there. Guilt lives there. There's, it's but shame, and we're always hustling for worthiness. The 9 hustles for worthiness is what the Enneagram shows you. Who feels worthy of love? Very few people. Well, I don't know what Da Vinci, what was in his mind, what he was trying to create. But I mean, you got this picture. I want to go back to it again as we end here. She's in the world, but not of it. The smile means, and she's still, when no woman was pictured in the world back in the late 15th century. In 1492 was when he did this poem. Columbus was off sailing the ocean blue, of course, but he was trying to put something in. He painted a woman in the world. Previous to that, that was not what they did. A woman was painted usually domestically. Even queens or princesses were in the throne room, and they were always pictured with some object to let you know what their role was. This is a woman who's beyond a role. She's beyond the persona of who I am, and she's in the world. One of the great sayings of Jesus that the Sufis bought on, they said, oh, yeah, he was a Sufi. They said, you need to be in the world, but not of it. She's free of that. She's free of all the cultural have-tos. She's flowing. Notice the flow in this picture. The river behind her is flowing. Her hair is flowing. Or if you really have a good picture, the mantilla is flowing down. Even her hands are in a kind of position. They're still, but it almost looks like a waterfall. Her hand over there flowing. It's all about flow, which is the right brain. So she's brought on somehow. She's a symbol of, she's smiling because she stopped hustling for worthiness. In other words, she's found her authentic self. She's found the truth, the beauty, and the goodness in herself. And the hustle is over. The hustle for worthiness is over. Now, this is what education is supposed to lead to, by the way. Educare in Latin and Italian, educare means to bring forth. And so what this work brings forth is your true self. You have to get of course, but then you can bring that into the world. The great mystics were just themselves. Jesus, Buddha, Merton, Meister Eckhart, just in all the traditions. Lao Tzu, Rumi, these guys were just themselves. They often got them into trouble, of course. The world doesn't want people to be themselves, but that is the journey. Yeah. Now, I'll leave you with just one thing. So I think, that's the answer why she's smiling. She discovered who she is, and she just is being that. She's beyond role. When you get older and you lose your job, or you retire, or whatever, or you're in hospice, like my brother-in-law Jim, who are you then? There's really this is the time by that time, and sometimes in that time, in that final stretch, uh, where you're stripped of role, you can discover this. And it doesn't matter if you learn it when you're 40 or when you learn it in your last 40 days or 40 minutes. If you can actually realize that, and that, and that, and that all of it is loved all the time. A true Christian will say, God loves everybody, period. No distinctions, period. And you should do the same. Life changes when you can follow that. Well, the left brain says, yeah, I can't love that person. No, he's not worthy of love. And so it keeps you divided. But I think that's the gospel. Everybody's worthy. Yeah, we're going to keep going with this next week. But one last thing, I'll leave you with a quote from Philo of Alexandria, which I think can be a start on this journey if you're saying, yeah, I really got to work on this. Well, Philo said, be kind. For everyone you meet is fighting a great battle. That's a brilliant statement. Be kind, because everybody you meet is fighting a great battle. And that battle is to actually find out who they are and be that. And it is a battle. And I mean, the people who hurt you, believe me, they're not in touch with who they are. They're not in touch with the beauty, truth, and goodness, the unshakable beauty, truth, and goodness that all of us are. They're not in touch with it. They can't be. And everybody's fighting a great battle. And healing is the answer, and that is wholeness. To become whole is this journey. It's the hero's journey.